Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Drive-In. I am your host, T-Bone, and I'm coming in to bring
Most adorable, pretty eyes. You have a boyfriend?
No, sir.
Why not?
They're mean.
Boyfriends? You mean all boys are mean? I'm not mean. How about me?
There's a disintegration going on that we really have to address. Values have been lessened to a great degree. VH1's been pretty cool. They don't show too much craziness on their channel, but other Viacom channels do. So I think that we should address this as a community as to what it's doing to the culture. People can say all they want to, but there's no reason for these kids to listen to music and then go shoot somebody. But there's something that's triggering these buttons.
Everybody out there that's watching, everybody that's watching this world is both. And you shouldn't model your life. Wait a second. You shouldn't model your life about what you think that we think is cool and what we're wearing and what we're saying and everything. Go with yourself.
All right, so welcome to Facts and Sass. I am Valley, your common sense advocate, yet always suspicious SoCal girl here.
Yeah, hey, and I'm Biddy, your fast-talking, your fast-talking New Yorker with a finely tuned BS detector. Now today, let's talk about Diddy, mogul, hitmaker, and lately lawsuit magnate and on his way to becoming a convicted felon.
Yeah, so between like the old school bad boy allegations and newer sexual assault lawsuits, it's messy. But we dive way more into that because at the end of the day, it's all about power. Common theme here, right?
Absolutely. So we're now diving into some real music industry tea, for lack of a better word. It's juicy, it's messy, it's got layers. We're talking about Sean Diddy Combs, a figure at the center of some of the serious allegations that you've ever heard.
Yeah, so Diddy's been a titan in hip hop and the R&B space for decades, right? Launching legends like Notorious B.I.G., Usher, and Mace. But the shine's been dimming with like all of these lawsuits piling up, accusing him of exploitation, control, unspeakable, sexual acts, and and worse. So let's take some time to really unpack this. So Biddy, kick us off. How did Diddy even become that guy in the industry?
Okay, yeah. So picture this. It's the early 90s, and Sean Combs, aka Puffy back then, is hustling as an intern at Uptown Records. He's got this ear for talent, right, and a knack for branding. By 1993, he's like, I'm not just working for someone, I'm building my own empire. That's when he founded Bad Boy Records with backing from Arista's Clive Davis. As you know from our last episode, Davis is known as the godfather of the music industry. Not to mention the mentorship of Usher, who was, 13 when Diddy became his legal guardian to produce his debut album in 1994, which is wild. Diddy was out here crafting whole aesthetics, remixes, flashy videos, that East Coast swagger. He didn't just make hits, he made careers. Mace, too. He was a bad boy, golden boy with that smooth flow on tracks like Can't Nobody Hold Me Down. You saw that little clip of that in the Cold Open video. So yeah, he's responsible for launching a lot of big careers, and us millennials, we recognize a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely. And like, keep in mind, being known as being from like the East Coast is really going to be important as we dive deeper into what has happened with some of his rivals, maybe some performers that were standing in his way to get to the top of the ladder. So, let's start with like Biggie Smalls, right? Like, we have to kind of pause on Diddy because this is like a very important story of one of the most major artists at the time.
It's a huge chapter in the Diddy world. Yep. Yeah,
because not only is it a huge chapter, but this is like the same timeline, right? Like, Diddy was on the rise, and Biggie Smalls, aka Christopher Wallace, aka Notorious B.I.G., like, he was gunned down in his prime. He was only 24 years old. And still to this day, like, no arrest, no justice, and yet there's definitely no shortage of questions.
And one of those questions, what exactly was Diddy's role? Was he just the morning mogul, or was there something deeper under the surface?
Yeah, and as we go through this timeline, definitely try to take a mental image of all of these dates that we throw at you, because it definitely does shine some light on what was going on. But let's rewind to March 9th of 1997. Okay. So Biggie's in LA. He's attending a star-studded party at the Peterson Automotive Museum, thrown by Vibe and Quest Records. This was 6 months. So only 6 months after Tupac's murder. So tensions are at an all-time high.
Oh, absolutely. That was like basically the East Coast, West Coast beef that everybody from our time knows about. I mean, that kicked it into, octane levels. So Big leaves, Big leaves the party, right? Around 12:30 a.m. He's in the passenger seat of a green GMC Suburban. Puffy, back then still going by Puff Daddy, is in a different vehicle, but part of the same like entourage of cars.
Okay, so 15 minutes later, right? So Big leaves at 12:30, and then at 12:45, they stop at a red light on Fairfax. And I know, you're not as familiar, right, with downtown LA, but this is like, Fairfax is like one of the main crossroads in LA, right? So a black Chevy Impala pulls up, and a man in a blue suit and bow tie, I kid you not, bow tie, opens fire. So there's 4 shots that hit Biggie, and then the final shot ripped right through the heart.
Yeah. And just, remember when we say the black Chevy Impala, the SS, the specific cards like the Super Sport, just kind of remember that in your head as well as the dates. So he was pronounced dead just 30 minutes later at Cedars-Sinai, and then nothing. No arrests, no real suspects, just silence.
Yeah. So let's break it down further. Puff was Biggie's producer. So he just lost like one of his main clients, right? He was not only his producer, but also his manager. And Puff at the time was head of Bad Boy Records. So he brought Biggie specifically to LA to promote his upcoming album Life After Death and to supposedly ease those East Coast, West Coast tensions and rivalries between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy too, because when you think of that name, Life After Death, and how he, he had
It's
some
like
already written, maybe recorded some stuff. It's really crazy how, he was able to have all of that material of Biggie, to continue on making that money. So Puff wasn't in the car, in Biggie's car when he was killed, but he was right there in that motorcade. He cooperated How coincidental. He cooperated with police, and publicly he mourned hard. He released I'll Be Missing You, that won awards, and Bad Boy Records made millions.
That's like never sat well with me, right? When people profit off of someone post-mortem.
Think about like Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, we see it all the time in the entertainment industry. And so, again, profiting off of his death, the label reaps most of the benefits of their work. But with any high-profile case, conspiracy theories poured in. Some say it was retaliation for Tupac, while others claim it was an inside job. That's also important to note. So Biggie was thinking of leaving Bad Boy to start his own label. Well, this is like another conspiracy theory. This was actually never proven. But, people were saying that he was thinking of like leaving, and because he was threatening, as Puff Daddy's biggest client to leave, that made him a threat to Bad Boy Records and to him specifically.
Yeah, it definitely could have. I mean, if that is true, that's the case, like that, there's a motive there. So here's where things get dicey. One theory suggests the financial motive. If he left Bad Boy, Puffy would lose his golden goose. He would have had ownership. He wouldn't have had ownership of his future track releases. So, and then some people even floated rumors about life insurance policies and control over Biggie's music catalog.
That's wild. Something to be clear about, right? Like, as always, we say like allegedly a million times, and there's no direct evidence because often with deep dives, we find these uncomfortable fan conspiracy theories, and they are definitely plausible, but no evidence has ever surfaced that directly links Diddy to the hit. It's just kind of like a lot of whispers, a lot of finger pointing, people trying to connect the dots, a lot of industry silence. So even with the trial currently going on, no one has officially brought up allegations of this event.
Yes, correct. So now you have the Russell Poole theory. This is a guy who believed Biggie's murder was tied to dirty cops working with Suge Knight and Death Row Records, and that LAPD officials allegedly covered it all up.
Yeah, I'm definitely not surprised. But, his theories were so compelling that they inspired books and even a Hollywood movie, City of Lies. And it was, Johnny Depp that played Russell Poole?
Yep. I actually just watched it last night. It was wild. We got to watch it together. It was a really good movie. But we're going to show you guys a little clip of that as well in just a bit.
Yeah, so, even with all of this, there was no convictions and no resolution.
Yeah, so who was this guy, right? Who is this guy? So Russell Poole was an LAPD detective with a solid rep, according to his coworkers and anybody who, has ever encountered him. Clean record, sharp instincts. He was assigned to investigate Biggie's murder in 1997. And what he found took him far outside the realm of your standard drive-by.
Yeah, so with Poole, he quickly came to believe that Biggie's murder wasn't just random, it was an orchestrated hit. Again, what a lot of people already thought before this investigation. So one involving dirty cops, Suge Knight's death row records in a cover-up that reached into the LAPD themselves.
Yeah. So, okay, here's the breakdown, folks.
Okay.
So we're just going to go this like quickly step by step. So you have, and this is Russell Poole's theory, corrupt LAPD officers. Poole believed that certain officers in the LAPD were moonlighting for death row records, like as security or something like that, Suge Knight's label, acting as muscle, enforcers, even hitmen. Then you have David Mack and Amir Muhammad. One name that keeps popping up was David Mack, who was an LAPD officer. He was later arrested for robbing a bank. Poole connected Mack to Amir Muhammad, a friend of Mack's, who matched the description of Biggie's shooter, a man in a blue suit and a bow tie. The other part of it is inside job. Poole believed Biggie's murder was planned in retaliation for Tupac's death. So he was trying to like establish a motive and, why they would, possibly have him taken out. And that LAPD officers either helped carry it out or covered it up to protect their own. There was also the cover up at the highest level. So when Poole brought this to his supervisors, he said he was constantly shut down. He was even pulled off the case eventually. He was told to stand down, and he eventually resigned in protest in 1999. So Detective Russell Poole did not uncover direct documented financial transactions like bank transfers or pay stubs between Suge Knight and LAPD officers, but he compiled circumstantial evidence and patterns that strongly suggested corrupt financial ties and personal benefits connecting certain LAPD officers to Knight and death row records. So here's a breakdown of what Poole found and theorized. Why don't you tell us about that, Valen?
Yeah, and again, what's interesting is like you mentioned that Russell Poole was like this outstanding detective, had a stellar record, like never, did anything that was corrupt, was really held to the highest standard. And he was shut down. He was pulled off the case. He was told to stand down, everything that you said.
Yeah.
And, his moral compass was like, this is so fucked up, like I'm going to resign.
Yeah.
And so if LAPD is doing that to someone who has never done anything remotely out of line, of course that's going to raise even more red flags about the whole situation.
Yeah, there was a quote in the I think one of the cops or one of like the lead detectives or something that he worked with, I forgot the guy's name, but and I don't know if he really said this in real life, but there was a quote that was said a couple of times, and it was like he was so good at his job and so loyal, like almost loyal to a fault where he became insubordinate. Because it didn't matter if it was like your superior, like if he found evidence or he wasn't going to shy away from it because you were above him or you had power, influence, money, whatever. He was going to just follow the trail and be that good detective.
Right. And so, getting further down into the breakdown, right, you have David Mack and Suge Knight. So David Mack is that, corrupt LAPD officer flagged by Poole initially, who was actually a known associate of Suge Knight. So that is, a red flag, number one.
Right.
Mack owned a Chevy Impala Super Sport.
Yep.
So red flag number two. Actually, we're like out of red flags at this point, technically. But connecting David Mack to the Chevy Impala, the same make and model that was used in Biggie's murder. Like, whoa.
Whoa, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, insane. And Mack was also later convicted of robbing a Bank of America branch in 1997, stealing $722,000. which investigators suspected may have been to fund under the table operations or payouts. So Poole's belief was that Mack was either financially backed by death row or supplementing his income to carry out off the book enforcement actions for Suge Knight, possibly including the hit or multiple hits. Poole then discovered that several LAPD officers were moonlighting as security guards for Death Row Records without disclosing it as required by department rules. So basically, they were like unrecognized UCs. And
like undercovers, yeah.
Yeah. And did they all end up stepping down?
Mac was arrested for that bank robbery. It actually was an inside job too, because the girl that he went up to, like the teller, she like filled up a bag with like, I don't know, it was like way higher than the amount that you would normally put in like a drop bag or something. And this gentleman from the FBI kind of pressed her and she gave it all up. But yeah, like other figures that had anything to do with this, there was one that was actually killed, and it's like a whole other rabbit hole. Like he's part of this as well, or allegedly part of this. And then we have another officer that we're going to mention in just a moment. So yeah, they were all taken down.
I did know about David Mack. Now, another officer that was working with him was Rafael Perez, and I was not familiar of kind of what happened to him after the fact, but both of them were allegedly providing protection, intimidation, and enforcement for Death Row. So this dual employment, it did violate the LAPD policy, which is why I was like, they had to have been kicked off the force, right? And, you know, because of this conflict of interest, especially as at some of these officers, they worked in gang units. So they're just like, they have all this like inside information about what's going on the street regardless, right? And then
they have control of anything that anybody that's going to get arrested or looked into, or
that's right. I didn't even think of it that way. I kind of thought of it as like they were giving heads up of what locations to like avoid. But you have a very good point. I mean, they're essentially like controlling the narrative. So, you know, tell me more about Rafael Perez and the Rampart scandal.
Yeah, so Officer Rafael Perez, another key figure in the Rampart corruption scandal, was reportedly linked to Mac and Death Row's network. While Poole didn't uncover a specific payment trail, as we said earlier, he pointed out that Perez and others involved in Rampart were living beyond their means and involved in side operations aligned with gang and label interests. Poole suggested that officers were being paid off the books for acts like witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and potentially murder for hire. So just like really quickly, I said I watched the movie. So in the movie, the gentleman who played Perez, they actually show Poole trying to test to see how easy it would be to take some evidence from the evidence locker at the at the LAPD office and at the station or whatever you call it. And it was very easy, like, you know, at least, you know, what he alleges that he tried. He went in, he filled up a bag. He decided he wasn't going to take it. He put it down. He signed his name as Donald Duck. And the guy that they had playing, you know, the evidence locker, I guess, you know, porter, whatever they call them, like the guy that sits there and signs people in and out and supposed to run everything, make sure it's all accounted for. He didn't even notice. So he followed Rafael Perez to where he was going with like a bag that he took out. And he ended up like meeting up with somebody who looked like they were going to buy the drugs. And he was also, Perez was also planning to take this guy out and just take the drugs and the money. And Poole actually followed him, you know, called it in, you know, took him down, you know, and he was arrested, and Rafael eventually he testified against all of this and basically said, like,
okay,
you know, it is a thing. Like we operate basically as a gang. But yeah, so that was like a really wild moment. But so Poole suggested that officers were being paid off the books for acts like the ones that we said. Suge Knight used Death Row as both a label and a street level operation requiring muscle and secrecy. LAPD officers were allegedly paid to act as enforcers, cover up artists, and intimidators, operating within the shield of the police badge. These financial ties were impossible to fully prove because of destroyed records, sealed documents, and a lack of cooperation within the LAPD, which is probably very easy, like when you're working from like within there, you know, if you have like this whole network of people, you know, that's crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, Poole didn't have a smoking gun. Like, he would have, right, if it wasn't for the lack of cooperation with the LAPD and if he had access to all of the records.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, despite all of that, he did have a pattern. Mm-hmm. So the pattern was that there were the connections between the officers and the gang members, the financial ties to Suge Knight, and the fact that every time he followed a lead, it went cold or it got blocked. Exactly what I was saying. Like, if his leads hadn't run cold, and if he was able to do his job, then he would have had that smoking gun, right?
Yeah, and it seemed like, you know, how we were talking earlier, that he was such a good detective and he was so, you know, clean and, you know, followed everything to the letter of the law, did everything by the book. You know, he would have wanted to make sure that he was 100% certain and really, really have all the evidence and receipts, you know, to bring it forward. So, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now get this. One of the officers, Poole Flag Rafael Perez, later became the centerpiece of that Rampart scandal that we mentioned, where over 70 LAPD officers, 70, were implicated in corruption, perjury, and abuse.
That is absolutely insane to me.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, sometimes it's like when people say defund the police, you know, most of the time it's because they're just, you know, saying what's cool at the time. They don't actually realize the corruption of the police department. But
yeah, everything is always like all or nothing. It's like there is a ton of amazing cops out there like Russell Poole and others, you know, that do their job, that, you know, go about their day, you know, get paid the peanuts that they get paid, but don't get into the corruption. They really, really want to just keep everything safe. But then there is a lot of injustice. Yeah, like you do have, you know, just like any other position, you do have people that get into it because they want to corrupt it. They want to use it for their own gains.
And money equals power. So, you know, we definitely know that large sums of money were involved. A lot of blackmail was involved. A lot of moving parts, really. So, you know, even if Poole didn't crack the Biggie case per se, right? Like, he definitely cracked a wall of lies inside of the department. And it does still suck that everything like went cold after that. But I don't know. I have this like glimmer of hope that more charges are going to be brought against Diddy, or, you know, somehow we are going to maybe get answers and figure out what did happen to Biggie.
Yeah. So Russell Poole spent nearly 2 decades chasing the truth. He did interviews. Yeah. He helped with books, including Labyrinth by Randall Sullivan, which was the book that was eventually turned into the movie we mentioned, City of Lies, and was working on a new investigation with the LA County Sheriff's Department.
And then in 2015, during a meeting with detectives about reopening the case, Poole collapsed and died of a heart attack on the job, still trying to get justice for Biggie. And like, we were talking about this, we were shocked that there was most likely an autopsy done, you know, like a toxicology report, things like that, but it was never released to the public.
Yeah. So, you know, and that's basically how deep this rabbit hole goes. A good cop went to war with the system. And, you know, from what we've just told you, it seems like the system apparently won.
Yeah. So again, this inspired the movie of Lies that like you saw. And I still need to watch the story. I did like read some reviews, and it looks like Hollywood didn't fully tell the full story, but we do have a really powerful clip to give you guys an idea of some of the things that Poole went through while, conducting this investigation.
Yeah. All right. Here you go. Yeah. It was a really, really good movie. And there was a part at the end of it all, like when he was still, trying to work on the case, and he's just, Russell Poole, Johnny Depp, he's just staring at this warrant to search that Impala Super Sport.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess he never got a chance to search it. It was just stalled. He was pulled off the case, but he's just like staring at this warrant, and he wanted to be able to look in that car, to really like go through it. But yeah. So, and Hollywood never like tells the full story when power and profit are on the line. But there were a lot of really interesting points in there. A lot of the stuff that we deep dived into and we looked through, came out in that movie. So it was a really good movie.
Yeah. And it looks like Russell Poole meets up with Darius Jackson, a journalist who teams up with the cop to try to find the truth. So together they, try to get all of this information that is being cock-blocked by the LAPD, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like they kept telling him like you're not internal affairs or whatever, and it's like, but he's on the case. So like what? Now we have to wait for like all the change of hands and getting everybody up to speed and hoping that they're going to do the same kind of detective work. Like I understand, well, I don't understand the nuances of, internal affairs and all that sort of stuff, but I get the reasoning behind it. But at the same time, it's like, dude, why would you stop him from, everything he's uncovering? And it basically like the whole overarching, like, tone of it was like, they just came off the heels, years later, but just, still tensions rose from like the Rodney King situation and the riots. And, there was a lot of like tension, between the black and white and all of that going on. And, so they didn't want to, they wanted to kind of keep things chill. Like the captain was like, on his way to retirement or something. And, they just didn't want to kind of ruffle the feathers. They just wanted to but it's like, you have a man that was gunned down in cold blood. And, you have a guy that can really crack this case open, and he can get rid of all of these really corrupt officers that are on your force that are making this world even worse. This situations that are out there worse than it is. But it was really, really frustrating. Again, as I told you, it was a really good movie, but yeah.
And so it looks like, this Jackson was more of a fabricated character in the City of Lies. So, in the real life, Poole was doing this all by himself. Or if he was working with a journalist, this was information that we, were not aware of. But I wouldn't be surprised if, he was trying to get some help from different avenues to explore this. So in the end, was he right? We don't know. Was Biggie's murder part of a much bigger plot between gangs, levels, and law enforcement? We don't know for sure, but all of this sounds very fishy. And Poole spent many, many years, right? We talked about 2 decades, trying to prove his theory.
Yeah. And ask yourself this: why did they bury his work? Why was every path he took blocked?
Yeah, because in this industry, the truth might get you killed or silenced, blacklisted, all of the above, right?
Yeah. So now, after the death of Biggie, his posthumous album, as we mentioned earlier, Life After Death, went diamond. And of course it did. He had just passed away. I mean, everybody, like that energy is just everywhere, and everybody wants to get that album. So an album that might have been a great jumping off point for Biggie to start his own career, sans Diddy, if that was the case. However, Biggie was murdered, and Diddy's career skyrocketed. The tragedy fed the legend and the label Bad Boy.
Yeah. So again, was it coordinated or premeditated?
We still don't know. It's still an open investigation.
But either way, it's definitely heartbreaking. 27 years later, we don't have answers, so it's just as infuriating. It's just, a talented young man murdered in cold blood in a system that never delivered justice. And to make matters worse, Biggie's mother, Voletta Wallace, just passed away a few months ago on February 21st. The grieving mother, she really just wanted to find justice. She had been following the tragic death of her son for years, basically remained tireless in questioning the pace and direction of the Biggie murder investigation. She filed a $400 million wrongful death suit in 2002, alleging LAPD's involvement in a cover-up. Good for her.
Yeah. Anything you could possibly do, because it's not only just about the money. I mean, yes, I'm sure, that is helpful, but it's also to kind of bring light to it, get some charges going, get some affirmation from the court system, something,
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, this lawsuit still ended up as a mistrial in 2005, after key witness inconsistencies.
We've heard that before.
Why were there inconsistencies? Was someone being paid off? Was Diddy involved? Again, no proof. So, in an industry, though, where so many powerful people thrive in the shadows, it is not wrong to ask and
absolutely
wonder about what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not. And a music industry that, let's just say, has a history of protecting powerful people over, the everyday Joe Schmoes like you and me. We're not here to accuse, but we're also not here to pretend that fame equals innocence, because when the lights go down, the truth gets blurry. A lot of things come out.
Yeah. I'm here to accuse. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Don't come after me. Okay, so let's quickly get back to that song that was released to pay tribute to the notorious B.I.G., I'll Be Missing You, with Faith Evans. And that song was a sampling of the Police song, right? And so, fun fact about that too, Sting, the singer who's part of the British pop band The Police, said Diddy never asked permission to sample the song. So the original Every Breath You Take track was essentially taken without permission, and because of that, they had to pay Sting $2,000 to $5,000 per day for life in order to get those royalties. Mm-hmm. So, back to it. Diddy was out here throwing legendary parties at places like the Red Zone, rubbing elbows with all the elites, and if allegations of his possible connections to Biggie's death are true, releasing a song called I'll Be Missing You is attempting to come across as a grieving best friend, but is really an evil thing to do, and it could possibly be a way to distance himself from any allegations that he might be charged for, right? I didn't do anything. I am just trying to honor my best friend, my confidant, my biggest client. We were going to go big places together. You know what I mean? He kind of was trying to come off as having the perfect cover.
Yeah. So, but here's where the beat skips, Val. All that glitz and glamour, it's got a dark side. There's been whispers about Diddy's controlling nature for years, like Mace. He's been very vocal about feeling exploited. In 2022, he went on Instagram Live calling out Diddy for allegedly buying his publishing rights for $20,000 back in 1996. Which is nothing.
Yeah.
And then rejecting Mace's $2 million offer to buy them back. That's super shady. And if you think about what we were talking about, with TLC in the last episode, when you get to that room and you're signing those contracts, you really I can imagine you're excited, you sit down, you're like, oh my gosh, it's happening, I'm about to sign, and you know, you don't really read, or you think that like it's going to start out here and then you're going to end up being able to renegotiate later, but it never seems to happen, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Making the Band. If you guys, do you remember like watching MTV? Like when they
It's
actually
kind of
played
like
music?
a blur now. Like, you know, as I was like going through this, I was like, oh yeah. But yeah, I definitely did watch it though. It's just I can't remember a lot of it, you know.
Well, so so Making the Band, it didn't start off with Diddy. I believe the first band, don't quote me on this, but I believe like the first band for Making the Band was O-Town. And then and then Diddy kind of like changed the audience for the show, like when he purchased it. So let's talk more about that. So Diddy's known controlling nature, you know, came out during Making the Band as well. Making the Band was originally an ABC series created by Lou Pearlman, who had his own controversy before his death, talking about him being accused of running the largest and longest running Ponzi schemes before Diddy took it over in 2002. So when Lou Pearlman had the show, it was more of pop focused. And then when Diddy took it over in 2002, it had more of that hip hop and R&B focus, which was more in line with the Bad Boy brand, right? So that's when that's like when it kind of moved over to MTV and became this giant phenomenon, and an unfiltered look into Diddy's twisted artist boot camp. We definitely do have some stories.
Yeah, so we're talking the band Danity Kane. That's a popular one, probably most people would recognize.
That's like the only one I really remember the most. Like when we were talking about like all the bands, I had to kind of do some work in there. But you know, Danity Kane was like one of my favorites.
So as you have them, you have Day 26, Donnie Klang. Each season followed aspiring artists as they vied for a spot in a Diddy-approved group. But let's be real. The real star of the show was Diddy himself, playing the drill sergeant, mentor, and CEO rolled into one. The moments were legendary. Who could forget when he made the band walk from Midtown Manhattan to Brooklyn to get a slice of Junior's cheesecake, which is like 6 or 7 miles, or like 2.5 hours of walking straight.
Yeah, because I remember when we were talking about it. I was like, I don't know New York at all. Like, how much? You know, how many miles is that? And you had to look it up, and that's crazy. You know, depending on like what time of the year it is, it's like either like very sticky, very humid and hot, or it's freezing. You're walking around in like, you know, 30-degree weather.
Yep.
So, you know, he also broke up Danity Kane on camera after tearing into them for internal drama that, let's be honest, he kind of fostered. I feel like he has main character syndrome, but that's just me.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, we all kind of know by now how producers can feed information to the cast of the show and manipulate situations. So he would stroke fires, as these shows often do in the interest of good TV, and then punish them for fighting with each other. So there was just like constant yelling, power plays, people getting cut mid-season, and no clear contracts explained to the public.
Yeah, so let's break this mess down, shall we? Because there was a lot beneath the surface. So you have the exploitation and toxic work conditions. You have multiple cast members describe the experience as emotionally abusive. You have long hours, minimal pay, and complete control by Diddy and MTV. You have former band member Freddie P., who said being on the show ruined his mental health and accused Diddy of discarding artists like broken toys, he said. Then you have the control over image and music. Aubrey O'Day from Danity Kane later said Diddy controlled their wardrobes, their weight, and their voices. She claimed they were overworked and underpaid with little input on creative decisions. Then you have financial disputes. Members reported not being properly compensated, despite the show's massive ratings, which is wild. Again, like the onlooker looking on, you think like, you know, they have access to all the best clothes, they're getting paid, you know, whatever, and it's not the case. Then, you know, royalties, touring revenue, music rights were allegedly heavily skewed in favor of Diddy and Bad Boy Entertainment. Then you have gendered mistreatment accusations. Female contestants, especially in Danity Kane, were criticized for their looks, their weight, their attitude, all on national television in front of everybody. The dynamic was often demeaning, with power heavily in Diddy's hands.
Yeah, that's crazy too, because it kind of reminds me of like when Tyra Banks was
it did too.
Yeah,
I was
like
gonna say
aggressive.
that before, because
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, just like another rabbit hole. But like, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
With like, you know, just America's Next Top Model, talking about like how heavy the girls were when they were like Victoria's Secret skinny. And of course, like beauty standards are constantly changing. You know, I'm aware of that, but they were encouraging just like dietary restrictions and like, you know,
and when they criticized them, it was like daggers. Yeah,
it was so harsh. I remember like one person walked off, and then several contestants on America's Next Top Model have been like very vocal since then, like Lisa, I can't think of her name right now, but yeah, I mean, the pressure to, you know, perform your best and look your best while having all those restrictions is a recipe for disaster. I mean, that is cruelty.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like in these industries that it's all about like the way you look, the way you sound, like your brand and all of that. Yes, you are going to have moments where you do have to, you know, keep a certain standard, you know, a certain look, a certain whatever. But, you know, they amped it up on these shows. You know, they made it more than it had to be. It didn't need to be all of that, you know, and they knew it. They were just trying to get good TV.
Yeah. So, you know, now knowing what we know with the trial, knowing like how he feels about women and knowing how he feels about, you know, the power dynamic, things do start to make a little bit more sense. So let's talk receipts really quickly. Over the years, over the years, former members have spoken out. So we have Aubrey O'Day, who basically called Diddy a vile human and said he abused his power for decades. We have Freddie P from the band, who claimed he considered unaliving himself after the show and blamed Diddy for sabotaging his life. We have Quanell K. Mosley from Day 26, who said that the contracts were predatory and that the fame was fleeting and traumatizing. Many of these artists were dropped after one album, and you know, despite like the huge MTV ratings, the music careers rarely survived past their first press tour. So here's kind of like the $1 million question, right? Did Diddy use the show to make artists or to break them if they stepped out of line?
Yes, exactly. And I think it's, you know, the latter. I really do. Like, I just think it was just kind of like to showcase the kind of power that he had, just kind of like an ego boost, which the producers also realized that it's going to be good for TV because people were tuning in to see like what kind of train wreck was going on today, what he was going to make them do. It was like watching a car accident, you know. But yeah, so from where we're sitting, it was less artist development and more ego trip. As I said, reality show meets unpaid internship.
Right. And now in light of kind of like the recent lawsuits and the RICO level investigations into Diddy's empire, these shows do look less like nostalgia and more like evidence. So we have the Making the Band saga. Now let's fast forward to Diddy mentoring a young Justin Bieber, another teen he took under his wing. So there's like this creepy resurfaced video from 2009 where Diddy is talking about spending 48 hours with Bieber and says it's a 15-year-old's dream. Like, what the fuck, right? Bieber was 15, and Diddy's joking about getting some girls. It's definitely giving, again, major red flags. I just feel like Diddy is a massive red flag.
Yeah, we're gonna show just like an encounter, basically like a confrontation after the 48 hours with Diddy, and it's really, really creepy. So here we go.
What's up, man? You good?
I'm good. How are you?
Young brother, everything's good? Selling out arenas and everything? Starting to act different, huh?
No,
you ain't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to hang out.
Well, I mean, you try to get in contact with me, you know, through all my, partners and whatnot. But, you never really got my number, so.
Correct. Okay.
My number?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you my number.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so insane too, because Bieber is clearly looking around to the adults that are in the room for help, and no one is saying or doing anything. It's like total creep vibes from someone who believes, you can tell he believes he has ownership of the young Bieber, because he's like saying to him like, oh, you know, you're selling out arenas or whatever, you like kind of like you don't know nobody anymore, like reminding him like I'm the reason why you're doing so well. So he's projecting that like ownership. And then Usher spoke about his time with Diddy too. There was a 2004 Rolling Stone interview where he said Diddy introduced him to sex, drugs, and parties when he was a teen living at Diddy's house. And Usher even said he'd never send his own kids to a puffy camp because of what he saw. And that's not just gossip. These are his own words. So, you know, we're starting to see like, you know, it's always been like a pattern. There's always been, you know, points that where people should have stepped in, or things that people should have, you know, did a side eye to, you know, et cetera, but nobody did a thing.
It gets messier. Since November 2023, Diddy's been hit with over 70 lawsuits, including sexual assault, trafficking, and abuse. The big one came from his ex, Cassie Ventura, who said that Diddy controlled every aspect of her life for a decade, physically, emotionally, and sexually. So she settled her case for $20 million within 24 hours, but this is what opened the floodgates, essentially.
Yeah, Cassie's lawsuit was basically a roadmap for others. Dawn Richard from Danity Kane testified in Diddy's 2025 trial, saying she saw him beat Cassie multiple times, including punching her at a 2009 dinner with some stars like Usher and Neo, who were present. Nobody stepped in. Dawn also said Diddy threatened her career if she spoke out about it. That's some mafia level type control, guys.
Yeah, for sure. I do remember that there was like a viral video that came out of the horrific hotel encounter. So lawsuits don't stop there. There's allegations of drugged drinks at his infamous white parties, coarse sex, even minors being targeted. So one plaintiff claims that Diddy assaulted them at 16 during a 1998 Hamptons party, calling it a rite of passage. I don't know how Diddy still has supporters, to be honest. Another says that he was drugged and raped at a 1999 event. So these stories paint a picture of what a predator using his power to exploit aspiring artists looks like. It's always a power dynamic when it comes to the dark side of Hollywood.
Yeah, it's chilling. And also remember the crazy information that came out about the baby oil. According to the court documents, though, coming from counsel Tony Busby, the claim that the rapper used baby oil that was laced with the date grape drug GHB to make assaults easier. The lawsuit, which was filed, suggested that the drug was absorbed through the victim's skin after applying the baby oil to make them drowsy. Then you think, like, how many of those bottles of baby oil was found in Diddy's home? It's enough to make you sick to your stomach. Apparently Cassie Ventura said that she didn't believe that the baby oil was laced. So that was her claim. And of course, Diddy's defense team denied it. Now that Diddy is under hella fire, the big players of the industry who have been silent during decades of Diddy's reign of terror and exploitation are totally silent about coming to Diddy's defense. Not Usher. Remember, he like took down like his all his like social media, his ex post, everything. He just like wiped his whole account. Many did. I think Pink did too at the time. Mary J. Blige hasn't come to his aid or anything, you know, character, you know, witness or anything like that. Not even Jay-Z. And he was one of them who even tried to say like, oh, I don't really know him like that. It's like, dude, like, it's like that Cat Williams meme. It's like, you know, we could see you, right? Like we like grew up with you guys hanging out. But he's also, Jay-Z's been named in one lawsuit alongside Diddy for allegedly assaulting a 13-year-old in 2000. Jay-Z denied it, of course, but the lack of support for Diddy from all of these artists speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have my own thoughts about Jay-Z and Beyonce and their control over Hollywood as well. That is for another episode. But you would think that someone who he launched would say something, but again, it's crickets. You think about people like R. Kelly, who's in the game for years, having sexual relationships with minors, and all of a sudden he's thrown in jail, and all the people who turned a blind eye for years remained quiet to come to his defense. So not saying that they should have, right? But it's funny how they could have said something and saved those girls, but they didn't. Even 50 Cent has been trolling Diddy for years, saying he avoided his parties because he felt like they were off. Like, good call. He was like, I'm not going to be involved in those freak offs. Like, you know, my hands aren't dirty.
Right. He even went on a podcast where he was like that Diddy had offered to take him shopping. And he was like, what do you want to do? Like, he already knew what that meant, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, he always had like a side eye at Diddy for a long, long time. So talking about 50 Cent, the project unofficially titled Diddy Do It, very clever pun, began development in December 2023 after Cassie Ventura filed a lawsuit alleging abuse by Combs. It is being produced by 50 Cent's G-Unit Film and Television and directed by Alexandria Stapleton, with executive producers including 50 Cent and David Carabinas. Netflix officially picked it up in late September 2024.
So proceeds from the documentary are designated for victims of sexual assault and rape. And don't forget the East Coast, West Coast beef. Some folks, like 50, hinted Diddy might have known more about Biggie's 1997 murder than he let on. So another person alleging Diddy's possible involvement of the late rapper's death.
Yeah, it's like Diddy's empire was built on talent but held together by fear. Right?
Yeah.
The 2025 trials exposing it all, racketeering, trafficking, you name it. He's pleading not guilty, but the evidence, like hotel footage of him beating Cassie that you mentioned, it's hard to ignore. There is a weird dynamic in the industry of music as well that I just wanted to highlight, especially in the rap game and R&B genre. The music industry seems to have three channels these days. There's hypersexualization, which it looks like Diddy was kind of the king of. That was like his whole MO, having his artists promote that life. Then you have like gangster rap that promotes violence and willingness to throw your life away just for some street cred. The last, and this is something new to the rap world, I feel, satanic influence, which we are going to get into more in future episodes because that's a whole deep dive in itself. But the gangster rap part has an odd angle to it. There have been allegations that the push for rap to promote such things were intentional. So just a little kind of sidestep. I just want you to listen real quick to this clip from a man known as Crazy Bone. He's from the widely popular rap group from the 90s. Bone. Yeah. Bone, 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 bone. Yeah. So, and just listen to what he alleges went down at a party.
And a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become solid investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remain filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies. And as employees, we'd also be able to buy stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic.
Right.
Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun, and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd, and all four of us was escorted outside. My industry colleague, who opened up the meeting earlier, hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking out about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting.
Okay.
I asked him, why was he involved with something so corrupt? And he replied, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we can do. And no, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences.
Yeah, so sorry you guys, like it kind of like froze a little bit right there, but you were still able to hear him. But yeah, so I just want to be clear too, he's not saying that he was at this meeting. He's actually reading a note from a friend of his that was at this meeting that is in the industry in order to keep his identity a secret for reasons that he explained in the end of it. Yeah. So, so if that's true, and, you kind of look at it too, like, when you see like what they promote, we've been talking about this throughout this series, like what gets promoted, you're kind of like molding the audience, us, into these chaotic, toxic individuals in society. And the more and more that you create of that, now look around you. Like, look at how crazy everybody seems all the time. How violent everybody seems. You saw the in our cold open with Prince and how he eloquently put, like, there is something that's triggering people. So that's some crazy allegations to say that they intentionally promoted gangster rap to fill the prison systems and to keep everybody in criminal mode. But
yeah. I mean, it isn't surprising. I mean, that's definitely wild. And if that's true, it should definitely be looked at as a crime against humanity. We talk about this all the time, like whether or not we're talking about like politics or the entertainment industry. We are weaker and more vulnerable as a society if we are divided, right? Mm-hmm. So, divided by the culture war, the class war, the sexism war. So even if you
spiritual war.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, even if you tell your kids not to listen or watch this stuff, they go out with their friends, they have their phones on with access to the internet. So it's everywhere now. And people around them, they hype it up all the way to be cool. So most of them do follow the trends. So, what's the takeaway about Diddy in particular? Diddy is a genius who shaped hip hop, where these artists like Usher and Mace just kind of like pawns in the game. And then like, what about Justin Bieber, who stayed quiet, but like clearly went through something? Like he's clearly going through something right now, right? Like if you just look at the videos, like between him and Hailey Bieber, his wife, and they have like a son, Jack Blue now. There is something disturbing going through his head. Some people are possibly alluding that he is, back on drugs. I don't know, but there's something going on there that started becoming that more people started becoming like aware of, like
right.
The trial
it's
started.
Like written all of his hate face now.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's so many like viral videos of different things that are, being shown, and he's probably just don't want to like face anyone.
He's like going
really
through
sad.
it.
It really is. I feel terrible for him. It's bad. And what I really think, Valley, it's a lot of this stuff. Like we talk about the pandemic and things like that. Like it's a lot of this stuff is a wake up call. The music industry's always had this dark underbelly. Power, fame, exploitation go hand in hand. Diddy's case shows how far that control can go when unchecked. Like we stand the art, right? Like we're constantly like listening to it, watching it, but we got to hold these moguls accountable. And don't forget the context of the music that was being put out, all about being a bad boy, extremely sexual, or promoting toxic behaviors. That became the norm in the industry. So if you ever wonder why music that comes out of the industry never talks about anything real anything positive, anything that promotes love for your family, respect for your partner, it's because people like Diddy and others are the gatekeepers.
Never like the nuclear family.
Never like, yeah, never. I mean, it's like hoes in different area codes and like stuff like that. It's never
hoes.
Yeah. Like, you know, there was such amazing music like in the beginning, like before he kind of like launched Bad Boy Records and everything. Like we had a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, you know, they were talking about, you know, going out and partying and like, oh, you know, look at that girl, she looks fine, and like talking, you know, maybe a little stuff, but it wasn't like it is today. It's like really bad.
No. It's like, it's definitely become a lot more sexualized, a lot more degenerate. Like I said, we are weaker when we are controlled and divided.
Absolutely. So let's listen to a quick clip of Diddy, who's speaking at the 2020 Grammys. And he's basically saying the quiet part out loud. So why don't you guys listen to this with us and you tell us what you think?
Yeah, it gives me the chills.
I know.
We need transparency. We need diversity. This is the room that has the power to make the change that needs to be made. They have to make the changes for us. They're a non-profit organization that is supposed to protect the welfare of the musical community. That's what it says on the mission statement. That's the truth. They work for us. We have the power. We decide what's hot. If we don't go, nobody goes. If we don't support, nobody supports. We control what's cool. We control what's hot. We control what your kids listen to, what they dance to. We control what's in video games. We control how they wear their pants, sag their pants. We control everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he's basically saying it. You know, like this is him being passive aggressive too, because he's like going through some stuff. He's trying to like level up, and you know, he feels like he's not being let to. Maybe there's stuff going on behind the scenes. So he's doing that little passive aggressive stuff in the beginning.
Yeah.
What he said at the end, he's not wrong. They did shape generations, and he talks about, and then like he points out, like making you walking around with your pants sagging and stuff like that. You know, that's something that they promoted. You know, and you see all these kids doing that. So it's really quite disgusting. I think that's you know, he like let the veil lift when he was saying these things, and he was probably straying away from the, you know, the secret narrative.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm wondering if Diddy was stepping out of line too much for the elites who actually run everything. Because there was a talk with the liquor empire Diageo that I'm familiar with about the London headquarters spirits giant. They are responsible for creating Ciroc, as well as like multiple other brands, right? You have like Guinness, you have Don Julio, you have Jose Cuervo, you have Smirnoff. But with Ciroc specifically, Diddy was the main promoter of partnering with them, and Diddy was wanting a larger piece of the pie. So he believed he basically had a right to all of this because of how popular he made it become, boosting sales, right? So let's break this down real quick. In 2007, Diageo teams up with Sean, now Diddy Combs, to breathe life into Ciroc, which, you know, is a French vodka brand. And that branding does work. Diddy doesn't just promote it, he makes it cool. He essentially gets them into the hip hop culture, into the VIP clubs, into the red carpets, into the works. And because of that, the sales skyrocket, right?
And in 2013, they doubled down and launched De Leon Tequila together. At this point, Diddy is not just a celebrity endorser. He's actually become a 50-50 partner in the marketing and image, and he claimed he helped build the brand's cultural capital from the ground up.
Yeah, but fast forward to May 2023, so just a couple years back, right? Diddy sues Diageo. So take some to court.
He accuses them of typecasting Ciroc and DeLeon as urban brands and failing to support them in the same way he says they do to their white-owned labels like Don Julio and Casamigos.
Yeah, I mean, I personally was not familiar with De Leon. With Ciroc, I personally don't think it was the case. But, you know, he basically said, like, you use me to build the brand, but you may never give my labels the proper love. So no, like, proper shelf life placement, no global expansion, no fair distribution.
Yeah, so Diddy's lawsuit accused Diageo of racial discrimination in business. He claimed they treated his brands as black brands for urban consumers only, denied DeLeon the same marketing budget and distribution muscle, and excluded him from key decision-making despite being a partner.
And Diageo, you know, they clap back hard. They basically call his claims like false and reckless. They accuse him of being like super erratic and uncooperative, and eventually terminate their partnership with him in June 2023.
Yeah, public drama, legal filings, you name it, all of it.
Yeah, for sure. So in January of 2024, the two parties quietly settled. So no public terms, but Diageo retained control of Ciroc and fully separated from Diddy in the tequila game too.
Translation, Diddy walked away with no ownership of the brands he helped turn into household names.
Yeah, and Diageo, you know, just kept sipping from the empire, minus the bad boy.
This wasn't just a brand breakup. According to Diddy, this was about racial dynamics in corporate America. You know, so he went there. How black artists are used to sell products, but aren't always given a real seat at the table. Diddy's whole argument was, you loved my image, my marketing genius, my influence, until it came time to treat me like an equal. Just a thought, but could that be why Diddy seemed to stop being protected and all his skeletons were pulled out of the closet? He started asking too many questions, pushing back against the leaders, etc. The settlement between Sean Diddy Combs and Diageo was finalized on January 16th of 2024. Then later in the year, Sean Diddy Combs' homes were first raided by federal agents on March 25th, 2024. So just a couple months later. That day, the Department of Homeland Security, along with Homeland Security investigations teams from Los Angeles, Miami, and New York, executed search warrants at his properties in those areas. And during the raids, authorities seized computers, phones, firearms, narcotics, the 1,000 bottles of baby oil, lubricant, items later cited as part of evidence in the federal investigation. Diddy was then arrested on September 16th of 2024 in Manhattan by federal authorities. This came after a grand jury in the Southern District of New York handed down a 3-count indictment charging him with racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation for purposes of prostitution.
Yeah, so let's just be like absolutely clear here. We are not painting a sob story for Diddy in any way, shape, or form, right? Because there's evidence that he is a monster. But this is kind of some food for thought. So how many people in the industry now and over decades have done terrible things that were constantly covered up and kept hidden from the public? So how many times have people tried to speak up and were silenced, not helped by law enforcement, because some of them allegedly are in the pockets of these people? So those are the same victims who got dragged through the mud most of the time, and are complicit by the media to make their claims seem less credible.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the federal government came after the mafia for these kind of claims. When will our government investigate all of this? Is it like a lot harder to build a case against these industry giants? I'm not sure. I wish I knew all the ins and outs of it all, but it just seems too coincidental to me that these folks who have parties that everyone who is anyone attends, celebs, executives, royalty, etc., then years later you hear claims of people being drugged against their will, minors being present with allegations that are worse, and you think, like, why did no one say anything? They all have a story too, like, oh, nothing happened while I was there, I always left early. But like, why did you leave early? Because you knew things got bad after hours. And this is something that Jaguar Wright, who's been very vocal about the industry and all of this, and Diddy and Jay-Z and all of them, She mentioned this, and it does make a lot of sense. Like, you left early because you knew things were going to get a little crazy after, and or even a lot crazy in some instances.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we did peel back some serious layers today, right? Like, from Bad Boy Records to Biggie's murder, from peeling back the making the band trauma to trafficking trials. Diddy's story just isn't about music. It's about power, control, silence, and finally, we are hoping consequences. So listen, we're not just here to preach or pretend like we know everything, but we are here to ask the questions nobody in the industry seems to be willing to.
Yeah, and let's be real. If even half of what's come out in these lawsuits is true, that's not just an industry problem. That's a systemic cultural rot that let a monster thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And this monster created hits, stars, and allegedly broke more people than he built. So this isn't just about Diddy. It's about a broken music industry that rewards charisma while ignoring carnage.
Yeah. So what do we do with all of this? You ask, we stay loud. We keep digging. We give victims their voice back, and we don't stop just because it gets uncomfortable. We have those conversations.
Yep, absolutely. If you are like listening out there thinking like, why does it matter? It's because what happens in Hollywood and music and media bleeds, and like all of it, it bleeds into real life. So into what we accept, what we celebrate, what we normalize, and especially with the timing of the trials, it is very disturbing what is normalized, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have people that were outside the courthouse just today. Today, the day that we're recording it, but outside the courthouse, celebrating Diddy still.
Slathering themselves in like baby oil.
Yeah, it's whether or not they were paid to be there to look like supporters, that's very possible. But you see it all over social media. People there's a huge amount of people that are against Diddy and really upset about what's going on, but you still have a good amount of people that are trying to say that he's just being unfairly targeted, and a lot of these claims are not real. And silence is basically a cosign. And here at Facts and Sass, we're not in the business of cosigning evil. And we're here to break through everything, dig as much as we can, and just give you guys everything so you can make those decisions for yourself.
Yeah. So next week. So the following Monday, right, we will be fully diving into the Diddy trial and some other moments where Diddy found himself in trouble with the law. So as we just found out, Diddy was acquitted on the major charges of trafficking in the RICO charges. Can't believe that. But was found guilty on transportation to engage in prostitution for Ventura, Jane, and others. So at this time of recording, we don't have the details of his sentencing, but when we go through the trial details on the following episode, we should definitely have confirmation, all of that, and we'll update accordingly.
Absolutely. And since Diddy and his lawyers are asking for sentencing to be expedited, since he was denied bail, we hopefully by the next episode we should have all that information and we can plug it in and give you like the full story, as much of a story as we can. So stay with us, keep your receipts, keep your eyes open, and most of all, don't stop asking why. Don't stop asking questions.
Yeah, definitely. Don't forget to check out our website. It is riseofmiddleamerica.com. So you can check out all the latest shows on the network, including ours. And don't forget to hit that follow button on our Facts and Sass Rumble channel. Please, please, please. We are lonely. We appreciate you. Here are all of our hosts as well. Pretty cool lineup, if you ask me. And again, hit that notification bell so you never do miss a moment.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us as always. We appreciate your love and support, and we love talking to you guys in the chat after, so this is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm Valley, your common sense advocate and always suspicious SoCal girl.
And I'm Biddy, your fast-talking New Yorker with that finely tuned BS detector. This has been Facts and Sass, the Puppet Masters of Hollywood, Part 3, Puff and Mirrors. And we will see you on the next one. Good night.
Bye.